Hello and welcome to Backyard Catch podcast. This is Nick Roby once again. We are joined by a good friend of mine, his first time on the podcast, but I'm super excited to have my good friend Chad on here. Chad, how's it going?
It's great. Just over here trying to, shelter in place and do my part to keep the country safe. But, man, real excited, real thankful that I get to be part of Backyard Catch. So appreciate you having me on, Nick.
Yeah, man. Love it. Chad and I, we used to work together in a former life of mine, and we always had a great time together. Despite our sports affiliation differences, I feel like we've fought through it and be able to be friends through that. So that's been.
I mean, to be clear, we weren't exactly, we're not like arch rivals, So
Yeah.
for the folks out there in podcast land, it's not like we had to overcome, decades of anger and frustration at each other's fan bases. So, but yeah, no, I know we always enjoyed talking sports together, and
Yeah.
I'm
So,
hoping that's more of what this will be.
oh, absolutely. So obviously, guys, if you're listening to this, you're probably as starved for sports as we are. This has not been the best season for when your hobby is watching sports. So we've come to series premieres of sports documentaries from the 90s and watching old playoff games. And I even reached a point where I was watching for a little bit the NBA 2K players tournament they were playing.
No, you weren't.
I was for like 20 minutes, and I was like, it just got to that point, Chad. I feel like I needed to share that just publicly. So
Just get it out there. Yeah.
It's been bad. So I guess I say that all to say is that Chad and I were just texting a bunch because we're both huge college football fans, and as it almost just feels like when you're college football fans with the NFL draft, obviously that just happened. That's the big sports thing that has happened. It's like watching people you've known for years and you're just watching them graduate and go off to their next life. And so we just thought, hey, let's talk about NFL draft and just dive into it. So Chad's been really gracious in wanting to jump into that. But before we do that, I thought it'd be fun if Chad, if you could just give like a little bit of just some sports background for you. I guess just what teams you like, what did you grow up playing any sports specifically, or any just kind of some history for what your background is with all this.
Yeah, man. Well, grew up a second generation Buckeye. My dad went to Ohio State, and I ended up going there, and so that's always been a real big part of my life and our lives. Just literally anything Ohio State, anything Scarlet and Gray. I can't get enough of it. So if that makes you turn off this podcast right now, I'm sorry. I apologize for some of our fans, but hopefully you'll find me to be a little bit more agreeable and level-headed than some of our folks. But hey, we've all got them. But I'm a pretty regional sports guy, right? Like I know there's a lot of folks out there, right, that depending on when you grew up, it didn't matter what area of the country you were, you'd be like a Cowboys fan because you started liking the NFL in the 90s, or, you were a Bulls fan, but you didn't live anywhere near Chicago. I'm very, very regional. So I am a long-suffering Bengals fan, long-suffering Cincinnati Reds fan. Obviously Cleveland Cavaliers, because we don't have an NBA team in Southwest Ohio, and but then also I just love my Dayton Flyers. They're probably my second favorite basketball team behind the Buckeyes, and I'm so heartbroken about the March Madness tournament because I am 1,000% convinced that they were going to bring home the title this year.
They had a very good shot. That was kind of bummed for teams like Dayton, where it's like, this is like, they were going to be really good. I was really excited to see them.
Yeah, I mean, one of their only two losses was to, what probably would have been the number one overall seed, and it was in overtime, to Kansas. So I think they had a pretty good shot at cutting down the nets. But, so that's kind of me. I mean, I grew up playing soccer and baseball a lot, and, dabbled in golf and other such things. And But yeah, man, I've been a high school coach for a long time, coached track and field and coached football, and so kind of all over the place, man. But just love sports. They've just always been kind of a big part of life and who I am. So yeah, that's me. That's me in a nutshell. There you go.
I love it. Thank you. That's awesome. Um, I love that you're so regional with your sports because I guess I'm kind of like that too. But I just appreciate about you that you definitely cheer for your teams. It's not like all these teams that are really good that you end up liking, or like you just they're your team, and I feel like it makes it that much sweeter. Um, just getting to see that. I think I feel that a little bit just with being a Baltimore Orioles fan. You're just like that's your team. You just rock with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the funny part about this too is because I'm a Clemson fan. If you're just tuning into some of these later episodes, so I went to Clemson as well. So Clemson and Ohio State have had a little bit of history, definitely more recently.
Much more recent. Yeah.
Much more recent. And but then I also my mom went to Michigan, so I grew up rooting for Michigan too. So it's kind of this funny double sided of just having, and then we have common friends who are also Ohio State fans. So just it's interesting to see like all these different things. But then like I used to live in the Charlotte area, and you just see a lot of like UNC fans. So or just all these different eclectic fan bases. And Chad and I were even talking about before we got on here. It's just interesting to see dynamics, especially like a bigger city like a Charlotte, like what kind of brings them in, and just seeing all these different fan bases. It's just interesting to think about people moving
Yeah.
to an area, and you're used to like being around the same fan bases, like your fan base pretty much, or like local fan bases, and then you have this interesting mix of that. So that's why I also it's just gonna be fun to hear all these different your perspective on some of this kind of stuff too, because obviously like we each have our own bias towards like what we watch and what we know and the teams we cheer for. But
Right.
yeah, I think that's gonna be fun.
I was gonna say it's funny you say that. I remember very distinctly. I was new to the Charlotte area as well, and went to Hickory Tavern on a Sunday afternoon to go watch the Bengals with a couple of my friends, and we counted in our time of watching the Bengals game and then staying for a little bit of the next the later afternoon round of games. In our time there at Hickory Tavern, we saw represented 26 of the 32 NFL teams
That's
in the
incredible.
restaurant. It was wild. I've never seen anything like that before. It was crazy.
I I believe it. I feel like the NFL is probably the most. It might be the most sports league where your fan bases can be from all over the place. Like you might not necessarily, you might not be from that area. A lot of people are, but it's not like baseball's more regionalized. But NFL is definitely all over the place. So we got your Bengals. So I'm sure this is gonna be a fun draft for you because I mean your Bengals have the number over one overall pick. I mean, it kind of felt like it was Joe Burrow's thing anyway. We can kind of dive into that now just because there's a lot of fun things to talk about it. I guess just kind of we can start off there. I mean, what's been your thoughts of like knowing for a while that probably that's who they were going to pick? Like, so I guess like maybe you can give like your pre, during, and post of just the Joe Burrow or the Joe Exotic era that's going to be fondly known as.
Yes, yes. The new Tiger King in Cincinnati, Joe Burrow. It's an interesting thing. Having, like I said, being an Ohio State guy, having watched him when he was in high school in Athens, Ohio, and was crushing it as a high school senior. And he finally got that offer for Ohio State. Didn't get the offer to Nebraska twice. They also did not want him when he went to transfer. And I remember being really, really pumped that he was going to be a part of our program and saying, I think this kid is going to be really good. That's not to say that I'm, some sort of football savant, but you kind of looked at him and you went, he's got the production, he's got the swagger, he's got the leadership. He's a coach's son, and I think he's going to be successful in whatever he does in football. So I was pumped to have him in Columbus, and I know that I was right there with pretty much all of the Ohio State fan base that were cheering him on from afar when he went to LSU. Even this whole past football season was really weird for Ohio State fans, I think, in a good way, right? Like to watch our team do so well with a transfer quarterback, but see a guy that was transferred out of Ohio State for more playing time do so well and then win a Heisman and win the national championship with LSU. So to see him come home and get a chance to kind of come home is, I think, a pretty cool thing. Honestly, as a Bengals fan then, though, right, like it's a little different. We went 2-14 last year. We were horrible. The 2 wins that we had, we probably should not have had. We should have been 0-16. We were so bad. And when you're that bad, you need more than just a amazing quarterback, right? Like you have so many holes to fill all over that roster. And so I think I was really torn, honestly, leading up to the draft. And even as that clock is ticking and the card had not been turned in yet, going, okay, are we going to trade down? Are we going to, get more picks? Are we going to let somebody else have Joe Burrow and not roll the dice, right? Like the history is not there for number 1 overall quarterbacks to win Super Bowls. And obviously we all want to win a Super Bowl. We don't want to just play in it. So, the history is not there. And so knowing that and being a little superstitious, right? Because for all sports fans, we all got a little superstition in us. But ultimately, I think I'm excited, Nick. I'm pumped about Joe Burrow. I have ordered my Joe Burrow, Joe Exotic T-shirt already in Bengals colors, and I'm ready to rock and roll with this kid. I think he has got a chance to be a really, really successful quarterback in the NFL, and he's got a quarterback coach as his head coach in Zach Taylor, who did good things with Jared Goff, obviously in LA. I don't know. That would be the full gamut of emotions right there. There you go. I went all over the place.
No, I love it. I mean, I feel that the feels honest to me. I think that's the hard part is when you're in these higher positions. The question always is, do you take one of the top guys, or do you try to go for more draft capital, saying that we're going for more, maybe if the players aren't as good, but you're getting more the number. And I think they just felt like he was their guy. I mean, he was good. He was killing us, Clemson. So I think you're in good. I'm excited to see he is getting drafted. Let's just say that. No, I love it. So there you go. I mean, Joe Burrow went number 1 overall. I guess just before we can keep going, what did you think about the whole draft setup before we get too deep into it? What did you think of just the virtual video call / like just them putting this whole thing together?
Honestly, I loved it. I think it was really great to see coaches and GMs, families being with them and hanging out while they did this whole thing. And I thought it was just a really good change up. There were some pretty funny moments. Roger Goodell, obviously the commish, he kind of was all over the place. And, you can find some pretty funny videos of him out there right now. And I laughed pretty hard, but no, I thought it was great. And like you said, when we started, this was something we all needed. We all needed this. So I thought it was really awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I think there's nitpick things with it for sure, but I think the fact that we still had the draft and it felt pretty normal, other than you're just not in this big arena, so you don't hear like a big crowd being excited for these picks. Like other than that, like buzz behind it. I think that was kind of weird for me at first, just when it just felt very quiet, and seeing draft picks very casual on a delayed screen. But other than that, I thought they did an excellent job, all things considered, I think. And then Goodell definitely gets an A for effort. He definitely.
The only thing that they definitely should have changed, and I'm going to go ahead and pin this one on ESPN, and most people probably know what I'm going to say, but just the human interest side of every pick. I mean, I think they tried to manufacture awful things about every player's life. I mean, they went on deep dives, and I think they wanted to make us try and cry every single pick, and it just was a little ridiculous. Don't spend the first 30 seconds after a guy gets picked telling me about this really hard time when he was in high school or elementary school or whatever. Tell me how he's going to fit with my team, and then tell me about what he's overcome. But that, again, like you said, that's nitpicking for sure.
Yeah, they're kind of awkward. There's some good stories in it, but yeah, there are some funny moments in that. And then Goodell, like, talking about the booing, I think that was kind of interesting. Like him, like, trying to get the fans, like, that were there on the video camera, like he was like encouraging them to boo.
Oh man, can we talk about how he might actually be the most awkward human being on the face of the planet?
I don't get it. I think it's almost just like he's just in this like web of trying so, like, he wants it. You can tell he wants to like do well, but it's just awkward. And it's almost just like steering to like he's just the awkward uncle and just like steering to that and just have fun.
The jar of candy.
Yeah. just it's just hilarious. But yeah, no, me too. I thought overall it was really good. So did you have any more Burrow thoughts before we keep moving on?
I mean, just again, I've gone from not sure if I should be excited to superstitious to all those things, but to be really pumped. And I think just to touch on it quickly, drafting T. Higgins, one of your Tigers, at the top of the second round, man, that is a phenomenal move by the Bengals. And it gives Burrow, an incredible target. And it gives the Bengals, you could make the argument that they have the most talented wide receiver room in the NFL with the addition of Higgins. So when healthy, of course, obviously. If you've got John Ross healthy, you've got A.J. Green healthy, you have Tyler Boyd, Alden Tate, and then you add T. Higgins to that mix. That's a pretty strong top 5 wide receivers the Bengals can roll out there.
No, I agree. I thought, for me, obviously as a Clemson fan, I'm pretty pro T. Higgins, but I thought that was a great pickup, and I thought the pairing of the two I think are going to be great because T's strength is he's not as much of a burner as in he can catch in traffic. He can high point the ball. I would say a similar style to DeAndre Hopkins, a little bit different, but just that sense of for a rookie quarterback, having guys like that you can trust. And then A.J. Green, a veteran, you don't have to. You can just put it into their area code and know that they're going to take care of the rest of it.
Absolutely.
I think the interesting thing for me is what's the Bengals style offense? Do they switch to a little bit more of a spread out 4 wide style that LSU was really going after, or do they do the more traditional, have a couple more tight end sets and some of those kind of things? That's the interesting thing for me is like, what's the style? Because Joe's played in both, but obviously a lot more successful in the second. But then he was also a lot more comfortable.
Right. So, yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to see. I think he played in a pretty wide open offense in high school. And obviously as Joe Brady opened it up even more so at LSU, he saw even more success. I would imagine, thinking back to Zach Taylor on the Rams, they played a pretty wide open offense then, when they had that really successful season. And I would imagine that is what he would want to do with the Bengals. I know the AFC North obviously is traditionally a rough and tumble, pound the ball between the tackles, and your wide receivers are just as good of blockers as your bookend tackles are. But I think the game is changing and it's evolving, and the NFL is obviously the slowest level to evolve. But I think with these pieces, you've got to imagine that Taylor is going to open this thing up and let Burrow sling it all over the yard, and have some of that Steve Young, those comparisons, really, really come to life there. So I think it's great.
No,
A plus for the Bengals on that one.
Oh, absolutely. I think you just got to roll with it after that. So we can move on. Washington was up next, and they picked your boy Chase Young, defensive end, Ohio State, who I'm sure how do you feel about that? How do you feel about him going to Washington?
Well, I think you've got to love that a kid gets to kind of go home, right? He's from the Maryland area, and same as Dwayne Haskins. And so back-to-back first rounds, the Redskins take Ohio State players and guys that are from that area. And so, I think Chase, consensus most talented player in the draft. I'm a big believer that you build your championships through really strong line play. And so when you've got a guy that can affect the passer and is strong against the run game, right? Like he's not just a pure pass rusher, but he plays the run really well. And I think you've got a really strong defensive line there in Washington. I mean, they have 4 first-round defensive line picks in the last 4 drafts. And so theoretically, the Redskins should have the most talented defensive line in the league. But I think this kid's great, high character kid, and I would say his work ethic is second to none. The interesting thing is and the one thing that maybe you could nitpick on him would be that in his last 3 games against the team up north in the Big Ten championship, and then in the game against Clemson, no quarterback sacks. He obviously affected the pocket in other ways, but no sacks. And so, those were arguably 3 of the most talented teams that the Buckeyes played that Chase Young had to play against. And they kind of neutralized them from that perspective. So, I think he has a really high ceiling. I think he has a bit more of a potential bust factor. I'm not calling him a potential bust. I'm just saying, there's a little bit of, okay, well, something to watch there. But again, love him. Not sure that they could have gone really any other direction there. But yeah, I think it's a, solid pick. Makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. Just to reiterate, I think with Washington, the position they're in with Ron Rivera going up there, which that I still feel a little weird about that he got let go from the Panthers, but I think you just pick best player available, and even though they were deep already, I think you just go best player. And there's nitpick things with Chase Young, but I mean he's an animal, and I think the fact of how much teams have to plan around him, it's almost like when you have to plan against a really good corner, it shuts down that half of the field. And if the numbers don't show it, you have to think about where they are in every play. And I think that can, like you're saying, that can really affect the game. And so, I mean, even just to keep it going, we have another Ohio State player in Jeff Okudah, cornerback, went to Detroit. So within the first 3 picks, I know you're pretty excited about this, we have former Ohio State, from Ohio, and then Ohio State. So really this first part of the draft is really just you guys just dotting the I, scripting the O, so.
Nick, quick trivia question for you. Of those 3 players, Joe Burrow, Chase Young, Jeff Okudah, which one of those 3 has earned his degree from Ohio State?
I believe it's actually Joe Burrow.
Correct.
There we go. Okay.
Nice.
I thought I saw that. Yeah.
Chase and Jeff both left after the 3rd year in college, but Joe graduated after 3 years. So, yeah, I mean, all of in any big program, right? Your Ohio State, your Clemson, your Alabama, your LSU, I mean, Oklahoma, USC, whatever. Like, you want the draft to be, basically a 3 hour or 3 day commercial for your team. And it was a pretty strong start for the Buckeyes in that. But, the thing that sticks out to me about Okudah is that he probably has the highest floor, I would say, of any player. At the top of the draft. Like, he's the guy that had no bust potential, I would say, and is going to be a successful starter for a long time, and has Pro Bowl written all over him. I think he was by far the safest pick that anybody could have made. I wouldn't have even. I would have been fine with the Bengals taking Okudah at number 1 because of what he can do. Like you said, you got a guy like him, shuts down one side of the field. It's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, even looking into his numbers, like, his numbers went down this past year, but it's because people stopped throwing to him. I think that's what corners' numbers can be very skewed, because they stopped throwing to that side of the field because they were scared of him. I think the question I wanted to ask you, though, in this was, I mean, the first two felt more pretty straightforward, but starting at 3 and definitely into 4 was where we started getting into the, okay, do teams trade down? Do they trade up? Detroit has a lot of needs, and while corner is really big, they just lost Darius Slay.
Right.
I feel like they've got a lot of needs. Would you have thought of that they would have traded down? Because I guess I was prepared for them to have traded down and still gotten Okudah.
I thought it was a definite possibility, and I think if they had traded down, I think you would have seen Okudah potentially slide all the way down to 7 at the Panthers there. But and not that is much of a slide, but I was a little surprised that the Lions didn't trade back. But again, I think you take a guy like that, and then you just literally don't have to worry about one half of the field in the passing game, and you just go, great, what else do we need to focus on? Because now we've got that box completely checked.
Yeah. I think they're just kind of going with where they're going to pick their guy, and that's what they want, and just roll with it. So we can keep moving on. There's just a lot of players to talk about as we're just wanting to keep it going.
Yeah.
We have the Giants next, and this is the part I think for a lot of us we kind of knew the first 3, but right here is where it starts getting interesting, and this is where when you look at all the mocks, starting at pick 4 is where it gets interesting, and the Giants with an Andrew Thomas, offensive tackle from Georgia. So I think it's not the fact that they went tackle, or because it was either defense or it looked like maybe an offensive lineman. But it was interesting that they picked Thomas. I don't think he was rated as high as some other players originally. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, right? Like, I found myself as I was kind of thinking through this, watching the draft, and then kind of recapping it in my own head. Like, there weren't many guys in this first round that I felt like, oh, that is a reach. That is a bad pick, right? Like, it didn't even really feel like there was many of that. And so I don't feel like that way with Andrew Thomas. I think he's a really good player. I think he's going to be a solid starter for some time for the Giants. Maybe he doesn't make many Pro Bowls, if any, but he's going to be a position on the line that they're not going to have to worry about, is my guess. However, I don't think that he is as good as someone like Jedrick Wills from Alabama. I definitely would have taken him over Thomas in this spot. I know, Isaiah Simmons also was widely mocked to be the 4th pick, and the Giants certainly could have used another playmaker on defense. But I do think, you've got to do something to protect your franchise quarterback, Daniel Jones, from last year, and franchise running back and Saquon. And so I think, going offensive line was the right choice. I'm just not sure I would have gone with Thomas here. But again, time will tell, and he could be totally fine.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's the big thing with just I agree with absolutely with what you're saying, and just a small thing. I think that's the big thing with offensive linemen. It's a very you can scout uh, as you want, but it's a very much like an educated guess. I feel like with offensive linemen, until you
Yeah.
actually get them into your system and go, it's just hard to know. But I mean, guy from Georgia, I'd say as good as any probably.
And here's the thing with the Giants, right? Like they knew they were picking fourth. They obviously did their homework, right? Like it's not like they had their offensive tackle taken from them that they thought they were going to get. Thomas was apparently their guy. So, like what you just said about him fitting into their system. Hopefully, they've done their homework well, and they know what they're doing, and that he was the right guy for their offense. So,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. All right, so 5 to Miami, and now we get a little interesting. We get Tua Tagovailoa. I'm assuming I'm saying that right. Quarterback Alabama. Tua is probably one of the most interesting players in this draft, and might be. I could argue that he might have been the most affected by the quarantine, and that team's not getting to see in person in these higher picks because of his hip.
yeah, I never thought about that. Honestly, that's a great point. I think Tua, I would have been fine with him on the Bengals. The only thing that and like you're alluding to is just his injury history. That he has not been able to stay healthy during the entirety of his career in Alabama. Even if you take away the massive hip injury that was so unfortunate last season, he has all of the tools that you want, right? Like he's got all of the intangibles that you want, the leadership things and those traits, but he's got all of the physical traits. Maybe if you want to nitpick, he could be 2 inches taller, but whatever, he may have the most talented arm in the draft. I think he probably does, but Dolphins. I think we heard rumors of them trying to trade up to get Burrow, but they said, hey, we've still got to get one of the 2 better quarterbacks in this draft, and Tua is obviously I think right there with Burrow, and if he's healthy, he might be a shade above Burrow.
Yeah, I really like Tua. I mean, if his hip is good, I love Tua, and I love the pick for Miami. I think he fits it. I think it's the leadership that they need down there. And I'm even thinking like Christian Wilkins last year, and then you have a guy like Tua. Like those are both really strong leaders for that locker room. Now here's the question I've been interested. Who would you pick though, Tua or Herbert? Because Herbert goes next. Justin Herbert from Oregon was the next quarterback, and he went to the LA Chargers.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind that I would pick Tua.
Really?
Yeah, I would say, and I have not been that impressed with Herbert. I think he's a good quarterback. He obviously is a gamer, but I don't think that he is anywhere near the same level as Tua and Burrow. I think he'll be good, and I think the nice thing for him is he landed in a situation where the Chargers are committed to at least 1 year of Tyrod Taylor, but so he has a chance to kind of be maybe a little Carson Palmer, John Kitna-esque, right? And be able to learn what it looks like to be in the league before taking the reins for the Chargers. But yeah, definitely I would have taken Tua. I think the Dolphins made the right pick given those two. But again, like I was talking about with Andrew Thomas, I like Herbert. I just don't love him, right? If I could say that.
No, that's good. And I think the hard part is like with quarterbacks, I feel like with quarterbacks, it's like trying to buy clothes at the store. If you don't like it at the store, you're gonna like it less at home, and you're not gonna wear it. Like I was just thinking about that. I was like, I have bought clothes at the store, and I'm like, I don't know, but I could see it. And then at home, it might sit in my closet. wear it. If there's a shirt that I love, I'm gonna wear it and I'm gonna rock it. And even if it's a loose analogy, but I just like that with all these players, but especially quarterbacks. I'm just thinking like, if he's your guy, like roll with it, own it, and do it. I don't like as much of the like, oh, we'll see. Like in this third round, we might get this guy. We'll see if he's okay. Like that feels kind of funny to me. I'd rather you just like go all in and just try.
Yeah, and I would love, this is where I would love to talk to somebody in the Chargers organization and say, hey, well, you guys, given the option, who would you really have picked, right? Because I very much I know they needed a new quarterback after letting Rivers go, but you've got to think they also could have traded down, gotten more picks, which they didn't necessarily need. They have a pretty talented team, obviously, but gotten some more impact players and maybe still gotten Herbert, or some of the Jalen Hurts or Jordan Love, obviously, later in the first. Would have been really interesting to see what would have happened if somebody would have tried to jump up ahead of the Panthers or the Cardinals in that situation and taken Herbert. See if he would have been the quarterback that we always see. It feels like every other year, there's one quarterback that just slides, right, for no discernible reason.
Right.
He was the guy that maybe could have been it, but it didn't happen. So we'll never know.
We won't. But I think for Herbert, I think he actually fits into a pretty good situation. I think. Like I feel like all things considered, even if I'm still unsure, there are times when I like him and times I don't as much. But I think him with the Chargers will be really interesting next year. I guess keeping the ball rolling. We could talk. Yeah. I feel like we could talk for so long about all these guys, but wanting to keep it going. We've got Carolina took Derek Brown, defensive tackle, Auburn, and I guess I'll kind of throw this in too, also just because this was on my brain. And then 8 Arizona, they took Isaiah Simmons, the Clemson product, who they list as outside linebacker, who is corner, safety, all these different things.
Offensive center, whatever.
Yeah. Did you see that meme where they have that guy who's like, he's like, I play linebacker, wide receiver, head coach. So it's just like this guy keeps listening.
Yeah, I missed that one. But that's Isaiah Simmons for sure.
Yeah. I mean, what did you think of those?
Well, we actually, was talking with some friends that are really good Panthers fans, and I proposed that to them. I said, would you rather have the guy on the line that can affect things from right at the point of attack, or would you rather have a guy that can clean things up in the second and third levels? And they didn't even really land on which one they would have rather had. I do think Derek Brown is a pretty strong impact player. I said this when I said Chase Young. I think you win championships on the line. I think you win with a dominant defensive line. I think that's where everything on defense starts. Right? You can have mediocre corners if you've got a phenomenal line.
Right.
Because if they're going to collapse the pocket, then those corners don't have to cover very long. But even Jeff Okudah, is going to give up a touchdown if you make him cover somebody for 10 seconds, or whatever it is. So I think Derek Brown is a great pick. I think that the tough thing for Isaiah Simmons, and I love Isaiah Simmons. He's a guy that, had the Bengals traded back. Oh my gosh, I would have been, all over Simmons saying, please get this kid. But you don't know what he's going to play. Well, that's the joke, but yeah, it's the truth too. Is he really going to fit as an outside linebacker? Is he going to need to switch to being an inside linebacker in like a 4-3 system? What is it really going to be? Because he's so athletic, but he's a tweener.
Right.
And I think probably the Panthers and their new head coach said, hey, let's take the guy that we really know what he's going to do, how he's going to affect things. And you even had guys like Burrow saying, hey, I had to know exactly where Derek Brown was on every single play. And so when you have that, that's a pretty pretty strong case for a guy like Brown.
Yeah. I think for me, when it comes down to it, I think they're both good picks. I think it's one of those things like they're both good. And when you're in this position in the top 10, you're going to get probably a good player if you've done your homework. I think for me, there's just factors of, what's interesting is Clemson actually switched. They were 4 down linemen. They've been for a while in under Venables' system, our defensive coordinator, but then they went to 3 into like a hybrid. I think partially specifically because we have guys like Simmons who can affect the play in so many ways that it gives you all these dynamic looks. And I think if a defense like he's going to Arizona, if they can figure out how to capitalize on that, it really. And then they got like guys like, I think, is Tyrann Mathieu still there? Or I know they had a few players in that kind of a style, but
he's not anymore.
Not anymore. He switched around so much it starts getting confusing.
Right, but I think that's a great point. Is that the Cardinals are the one, again, Brown and Simmons, both phenomenal players, both phenomenal talents, and I think they both landed at the appropriate place. That's one thing that I was really, really blown away by in this year's draft was that so many players you went, oh, yeah, that guy makes sense there. I can see him being a part of that organization, from a cultural fit, from a a schematic fit.
Sure.
And Simmons, he as a guy who doesn't really have a position, goes to an organization that has had success with guys that don't have positions. They've done a really great job, especially on the defensive side of the ball, for a long time. It feels like, and that's coaching turnover and things like that, of being able to put guys that are just really great football players, really great athletes, and letting them thrive and seeing success. And so, yeah, I think Simmons going there, great fit. Still, it's also, I love thinking about, here's this kid that was a 2-star recruit splitting time between wide receiver and defensive back from Kansas, where high school football cannot be that good. And now he's the number 8 pick in the draft. I love that. I love those sorts of things.
I love it. I guess I've just got one more thing, and then we can move on from Isaiah. I think Brown fits in Carolina. I think the thing for me is, I would say, is football fan wise, I feel like if I was going to pick a team, I would say mine's the Panthers. I grew up a few different people. But the Panthers are probably the team I root for. Just I used to live in the city, and just that's what I would probably say. But you still root for. I feel like as college fans, you end up rooting for guys that you really know on other teams too. So that's why the Raiders got kind of become a joke, Clemson West, because they keep drafting Clemson players. But I think the thing is, I just wish eventually that the Panthers would really draft a high Clemson player. It's starting to feel a little bit, and even they don't even really do it with South Carolina either. And I think they really push that they are Carolina, not North Carolina. They're Carolina. They're moving their practice facilities to Rock Hill, which is just south of Charlotte, into South Carolina. But we can't point to a big draft player from those fan bases to support that. And it just felt like this year, I just felt like it was like a wish of like, man, I'm really surprised they didn't go for a Clemson guy who fits a need, and it's not a reach, like it fits that. And so it's not like this big thing, but it does start to feel like a little bit like, wait, are y'all like not picking Clemson players? Like, it's an interesting, it just felt like there could have been you would have had a lot of Clemson players who would have turned into, or at least they would have checked out more. I think
it's weirdly encouraging to hear that, because for the longest time the Bengals and the Browns have not also drafted Ohio State players, and you kind of go, hey, you literally got a NFL factory down 2 hours from both of you, and there's multiple times and that we watched then, even this year. J.K. Dobbins and Malik Harrison go to the Ravens. And now as Buckeye fans, we've got to watch them play against our professional teams in Ohio a couple times a year, and have to cheer against guys that we have been cheering for the past couple of years. So I get it, man. It is a weird thing from that fan side of things, but that just underscores how much of a business it is and how much these guys is on the line, for them to make picks based on their head, not on their heart.
Oh, 100%. 100%. So I don't blame it. It just was like, man, like I'm bummed. So hopefully in the near future. I guess just to finish out the top 10, I'll just keep announcing these. It feels like I'm re-announcing the draft. Jacksonville took C.J. Henderson, who's cornerback from Florida, so he stays in the state of Florida. And then the Cleveland Browns took Jedrick Wills Jr., offensive tackle that you were talking about earlier from Alabama. What do you feel like those fits are for those guys and those teams?
Henderson, I think, is a great fit. They traded away Jalen Ramsey, and I'll say there's a lot of people that were starting to think and say things that C.J. Henderson might be a better prospect than Okudah. I really don't believe that, and I say that from a pretty objective standpoint. Now I think they're close, but I think C.J. Henderson lands in a good situation. It seems like the Jaguars almost always have a really kind of tenacious defense down there, and again, fun for a guy like him to stay at home. Opposite of what we were just talking about with the Panthers, the Bengals, the Browns. The Jaguars again select a player from the Sunshine State and keep him kind of home. So I think it's a good pick right there. Him at 9 feels like a good fit. You're not overdrafting him, you're not underdrafting him, that sort of thing. And then obviously, to move to the Browns with Wills, gosh, I love this kid. I love his game. I think he's really, really talented, and I think he's got that nasty that you want. He's got that adaptability that you maybe need, especially with the playing right tackle. But the plan is to move him to left, since the Browns acquired Conklin in the offseason. Mm-hmm. And man, if I was the Browns, turning in that card would have been so fast. Watching him fall down to us at 10. So yeah, they have to be ecstatic about getting him there.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have much more to say. I feel like you pretty summed it up pretty well. It feels like both those guys kind of fit the personality of both those teams and needs that were there. So I feel great about that. We've got the Jets at 11. They took Mekhi Becton, offensive tackle, Louisville. Let me read you. I wrote this down just so I can make sure I get this right. Mekhi Becton, 11 starts, no sacks allowed. He is 6'7", 364 pounds.
He's enormous.
That's a large human being.
He also ran, the fastest 40 time at the combine for somebody over 300 pounds or 325 or something like that. I mean, dude was moving. He ran like a 5'1" or something like that.
It's scary. Like how like that large of a person can fly.
Yeah, shouldn't be a thing. Shouldn't be a thing. But again, man, super upside, super potential here. And you've got to continue to put pieces in place to protect Sam Darnold and be able to protect your investment there. And I definitely would have taken this guy over even Andrew Thomas. Again, I like Andrew Thomas as a player that the Giants got, but it'll be really interesting to watch both these offensive tackles both playing in New York and to see where their careers go. I think you'll be able to compare these two pretty evenly throughout their careers. But I wouldn't be surprised if Becton has the better career than Thomas.
Yeah, no, I mean, he is a physical specimen. I think he can fit really well. The one question I do, and also I think it's great that Jets attack this need because they didn't have a great run game either. The one thing is I do wonder sometimes when and I've played offensive line, I'm 6'8". For those listening, it's not always easy to get lower as you think it is when you're that tall. So even though NFL guys are taller, it's a leverage game, right? And so I'm just that is my one thing of like sometimes it feels funny asking is like, are we too big? Like, is he like? I think he has to learn how to really like use his feet to get the leverage, and that's what I'd be interested to see from him. And then we've got it's still weird calling the Las Vegas Raiders.
I'm not sure I'll ever get used to that one.
I don't know if I'll get used to it, or Clemson West, as we fondly refer to them in the Palmetto State. They took Henry Ruggs III, wide receiver, Alabama. So we have our first wide receiver off the board, and it is Ruggs, not Lamb, not Judy, not Jefferson or Higgins. It's Henry Ruggs, who is very good in his own right, but not
who's incredible, can score from anywhere on the field. But let me ask you this, Nick. Doesn't it feel like Al Davis made this pick?
Oh, it does. It is definitely like it has a feel of like we're going to take a different guy. We're going to take our own guy.
We're going to take just some guy that runs really, really fast.
Reminds me back in the day, they took Jacoby Ford from Clemson, who is, if you're not as a Clemson fan, he was super fast for us. He was there with CJ Spiller. He was a track star, and he also went to the Raiders. It just has that similar kind of feel. But I think Ruggs is better.
Yeah, I think Ruggs is a phenomenal wide receiver. I think he's incredibly talented. But you pointed it out. You're right. I would have taken Judy, and I would have taken CeeDee Lamb over Henry Ruggs. But again, in the right system, a guy like Ruggs, I mean, he's dangerous from everywhere on the field, and you have to account for that. You know, we've seen that with Tyreek Hill, and we've seen that with other players like that you just have to account for them, and that's Ruggs. So now the Raiders and Derek Carr have a weapon they can deploy in many different fashions that you always have to account for.
Yeah. No, I like it. I just want to leave one stat as I was looking some of these up, and I'm sure you might have seen this already, but they Ruggs in his career has 98 receptions. 24 of them went for touchdowns. Let me repeat. 24 out of 98 receptions in his career went for a touchdown. That's almost a quarter of the time.
So once every 4 times he catches the ball, he is going to score a touchdown.
Yeah, that's amazing. So they have a weapon, and I think if they can use him, go for it. We can move on to the Fighting Toms in Tampa Bay.
That's right.
We've got they take Tristan Wirfs, offensive tackle, Iowa. What's your quick thoughts on that?
Well, you can't go wrong taking an offensive lineman from Iowa. Right? Like that's, there's, that's one of those things that are guarantees in life: death, taxes, and Wisconsin and Iowa offensive linemen. Right? Like those are. If you're going to draft any offensive lineman, make them from Wisconsin, make them from Iowa.
Yeah.
But so I think Wirfs is great. I think I would have him kind of tied with Becton. It's just that Wirfs probably has a little bit actual more polish to him than Becton. So
I agree. Yeah.
Ultimately, I think a lot of these offensive tackles were very, very close in terms of how I would evaluate them, and so I think the interesting thing here, right, is like that somehow San Francisco and Tampa Bay they pulled off a trade where they swapped first-round picks, and the Niners, ended up getting, another pick out of this that they then used to move back up in the first round. We can talk about that one later, but it was a funny trade, at that time to see that happen, and then the Buccaneers take an offensive tackle. But obviously, you've got to make sure that Tom Brady plays until he's 50. So, you got to take a guy like Wirfs.
I mean, any man that can jump standing still, being 6'5", 320 out of a pool, standing on his feet, I think that's all I pretty much know about Wirfs is that he's offensive lineman and he can do that. So I think
that was one of the craziest things I think I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, if you can see that video, it's incredible. Just that's all I can say with that. I agree, though. I think you got to protect Tom.
Yeah.
For all
great pick, solid pick. I think he'll do very well down there.
Mm-hmm. And then 14, San Francisco 49ers take Javon Kinlaw, defensive tackle, South Carolina. Um, his story, I actually would say his is one of those stories I'm glad that they emphasized. It was really
Yes.
cool. And I knew some of it just from being a little bit from the area, but it was just really cool just seeing him getting picked and just seeing his story and getting to, I think just nights like that night, I think just are also good reminders of like what this means for these guys and like how it can just positively change their life. So what do you think of him from like from a football standpoint though?
Oh, just from a football standpoint, I'm really, really impressed with this kid, and I think you know, in some ways, he reminds me of a larger Melvin Ingram. Just in terms of just an athletic freak there. Both obviously from South Carolina too, but yeah, no, I think you pair him with Nick Bosa and on that defense, gosh, that just continues to keep the San Francisco 49ers as favorites in the NFC. Um, I think that's a great pick for them, and he is a little bit more raw, and he still is developing. So he's going to have a bit of a learning curve for sure, but I think he landed again. We continue to talk about it, but he landed in a really, really great spot, and a great situation. So I think the Niners made a good pick here. I almost want to reserve a little bit of judgment though, because I do feel like him, like Becton, a little bit more raw, and they've got some learning, some polishing to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's with all of these. Of course, it's we have to kind of wait and see. And of course, when they judge these, it's like immediate reaction. But then you do have to like kind of wait and see like what will happen in the future with them. But I like the pick. I think it's a good solid pick for them. Then we've got another Alabama wide receiver. We've got Jerry Jeudy, or Judge Judy, as they like to say, going to Denver. I love this pick for Denver. I honestly, I'm high on Jeudy. I mean, our team's had to face him a few times, but Judy's good, and I think he's going to translate. And going to Denver, I love this pick. What do you think about him there?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think he is a great receiver. He's a great skill. He does everything well on a football field. And the Broncos, they know that you've got to have the arms. I mean, it's an arms race, and they have to face the Kansas City Chiefs twice a year with all of the speed that the Chiefs continue to put on the field. And the Broncos address that. They got Jeudy here. They got KJ Hamler in the second round, speed merchant out of Penn State. And so I think you put those two guys on the field, and you've got a potential to score through the air constantly. So, yeah, no, I love this pick. I love the pick of Jeudy here. Again, I maybe would have taken him over Ruggs. But I think the Broncos, phenomenal pick here. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we can keep going up. I guess we can wrap up. There's so many players we want to talk about. We can kind of end it here at 16 just because it's right at the halfway point. We're getting to the hour mark, guys, and so don't want to make too long of one episode. So we'll end up making a second episode just so we can keep talking about it. But we'll finish up here with Atlanta at 16. They've got the new unis, the ATL unis, and they pick one of my guys, AJ Terrell, cornerback from Clemson. I like Terrell, but I wasn't as sure at first about this, but I feel a little bit better about it being after the fact. What do you think about Terrell going to the Falcons?
Well, I'm interested to hear what has made you change after the fact, because man, this is you're not going to like this. I don't think this is a good pick at all. This is one of the couple picks in the first round that I did not agree with. It felt like the Falcons had a bit of a panic moment here, and grabbed AJ Terrell. Now, again, obviously, we don't sit in these war rooms. We don't do all the scouting. We don't do all the interviews, right? We're not at the combine, those sorts of things. And so there was a reason that they picked A.J. Terrell when you still had guys like Jeff Gladney and the kid from Auburn and Christian Fulton and a
Sure.
lot of other corners on the board that
Yeah.
were also very talented corners. So, I think there was it feels a little bit though like the Falcons maybe positionally made a panic grab here and snagged AJ Terrell. I think he's a good player. I think he probably fit better in the 22 to 32 range than at 16. So I think it was a little bit of an overdraft. But again, he's a good player. He obviously played well for the Tigers and usually did a phenomenal job shutting down one half of the field. For your listeners, I'm married to a Tiger, and so I watch about as much Clemson football as Ohio State football. And so I've watched Terrell for the past few years, and I do really like him. I've always thought he was a good player, but I don't love this pick.
Yeah, it felt. I think you're right. It did feel like a little bit of a stretch. I think it's one of those situations where this team has a need, a glaring need. They have dipped into the Clemson well before. They've gotten Grady Jarrett, defensive tackle, Vic Beasley, defensive line, and so they've dipped into that well before. It's a little bit more local, being over a couple hours away. I think Terrell's a good player. I think Terrell. He worked really well in Clemson's system because Clemson blitzes a lot and puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and he's able to play tight coverage. I think
Right.
if it shows, he does have a little bit of a weakness in more of the space, in the sense of like if you've got, LSU was able to do a lot of space, and I don't think that fits him as well. So I think my hope is that he can just basically develop and just be. It's a fit with all these things, and so I think that he can fit into it. And I'm just hoping that after the draft stuff kind of dies down, that they can kind of see that a little bit more in it. But it did feel a little bit of a reach if they needed a corner, and so they went with what they knew was in front of them. I like Terrell, but I think obviously you have to kind of play to his. With all these guys, you got to play to their strengths more than otherwise their weaknesses can kind of be more glaring, if they're not set up well. So I think that's the thing what I'm kind of leaning towards is if he can get set up well to keep going into, because he can make plays. He intercepted too. He can make the plays, but I think you're right. He doesn't always. If he gets beat on like the double move, then their guys are open. But if he can play press, he can be really good.
And I think what you said there, about the style of defense that Clemson played with high pressure from the line, and putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback quickly, causing him to make a decision. Terrell didn't have to cover as much in space, and you're right. When he did, you against what is a fleet of NFL receivers at LSU. Good Lord, those guys, along with obviously the Alabama receivers, just a phenomenal collection of talent. But, it will be interesting to see if all of a sudden that was, the best offense that Terrell has ever played against. And if we're going to see more of that as his career goes on, I for his sake, I hope not. But I think, it'll be interesting to watch. Just if he can play and learn to play in space a little bit better, he's going to have to cover a little bit longer. I would be interested to know what the Falcons, the quarterback pressure stats were from this past year. I don't have those in front of me, but if they're a high pressure team or not, and if he thinks he can play in that system. So,
yeah, no, I agree. So, all right, guys. Well, that'll probably wrap it up for this first episode. Thanks for listening, and we can dive into more of the draft at another time. But like with all these things, you can do deep dives in all these guys. It can fly by. Chad and I were joking about how just time can fly by on these things. So, well, we really appreciate you listening. Chad, thanks so much for being on. This was really fun.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I love this. This is great.
I love it. Chad's rocking. We're doing a little Zoom call as they suggest to do now, and he blew my mind in that you didn't that he was just showing me he has Ohio State as his background right now, so that's been pretty fun to watch. I need to step up my game. I know you guys can't see this, but I'm gonna step my game next time for this.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Ready for it.
Yeah. So thanks for listening. Remember just to like, subscribe, review, let friends know if you like the podcast, share with them. Reviews are big for us because they help spread the word, and tell us what you like. If you agree with these picks, if you have different takes or you have taken different guys, definitely let us know so we can talk about it. So anyway, thanks for listening, guys. And for now, we are signing off.